Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. There's some trends worth paying attention to these days around the beer space, and one of them is the THC seltzers. They're popping up on menus in certain states alongside IPA and lager. We'll learn more about the history, the process, and the future of this style with Joe Wells of Minnesota's Fair State Co-op. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. Listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. You can visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to help keep the content fresh. A few bucks goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show or any of our shows, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of that, attention brewers, registration for the 2024 Best of Craft Beer Awards is now open. Sign up today. Now in its 10th year, this is a BJCP sanctioned event, judged by fellow brewers, professional judges, and industry leaders. Judged in Oregon, it's the third largest professional brewing competition in North America, and it's a chance to have your hard work evaluated and rewarded. Use promo code ALLABOUTBEER to receive 10% off of your order. Don't delay. Register your beers today by visiting bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. One more time, that's bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. THC seltzers got on my radar in a big way late last year in Iowa. I had a conversation, as you might remember on this show, with Scott Seelix of Lua and Climbing Kites about their entry into the space. Their beverage is being contracted out of Minnesota's Fair State Co-op, which also has its own line of seltzers in that space. And the brewer putting in the work to make and develop those is Joe Wells. Wells has been in the craft beer industry for over a decade, from California to Canada, and he spent the last 5 years at Fair State, where he serves as the head brewer. He clued me in on how these seltzers are made, how they came about in the first place, and what the market is doing in response to their availability. Here's our conversation. Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for doing this. In going back to the beginning of your career, you talked about being in beer quality before getting into brewing. What first attracted you to the overall brewing industry, and then did starting off in like in a QC role, has that helped inform the rest of your career, like to where it is now?
Yeah, very much so. So I originally got into brewing when I was in college. Pretty standard story, home brewing and getting a degree in analytical chemistry, and got pretty excited by the idea of working at a brewery. I knew nothing about the industry, but I remember sending out those first job applications after graduation, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I ended up bouncing around for a little bit and worked in pharmaceutical industry for a little while before I ended up at Hangar 24 Craft Brewery in Redlands, California, as their QA/QC lab manager. It was a interesting position. They were flying by the seat of their pants, and I really got to go in and make a lot of choices on how we would make good beer. Definitely made some poor choices along the way, learned a lot, and really immersed myself in the industry as fast and as hard as I could. So it's really given me a lot of tools and information to think about the beer and the products that we make, and make sure that we're making something that's safe and high quality for people.
Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about safety as well as quality, as we start to talk about some of these seltzers and some of these beverages as well. But when you transitioned to the brewing side, I know there's some brewers that are just sort of jack of all trades. There's ones that would try to dial into specific recipes. There's ones that will only brew a certain style. What kind of brewer were you when you transitioned to that side of things?
When I first got into the more onto the brewing side, my definite passion lied in mixed culture beer. I think everybody had that moment about 7, 8 years ago where sour beer was the future, and
It's the
that's what we were all.
future. It's a
Yeah,
rocket ship to the moon.
yeah, everybody thought they were going to sell 10,000 barrels of sour beer and be rich. But I really enjoy mixed culture beer. I think it's really fun. But pretty quickly you turn into the beer geek that has a couple hundred bottles of beer in the basement of your house, and you never drink it, and you start drinking a lot more hams and high life, and realize that easy drinking lager beer is where it's at. And actually, Fair State has ended up being really great for me in that regard, in that we focus on making great lager beer.
Yeah.
Our Pilsner is one of my favorite beers. It was one of my favorite beers to drink before I started working here, and then got lucky enough to come here and make it. And we've definitely focused on making great lager beer since then.
Yeah, Fair State. I remember during the Craft Brewers Conference in 2 years ago, drinking a lot of lager, hanging out at the
Yeah.
brewery.
I think we
But
had
then,
I think we
yeah,
had 7 or 8 Pilsners on tap for CBC. It was fun.
yeah, and it was what was really cool was looking around the room, and just seeing brewers from around the world who were there, all drinking lager, and it was, it sort of like reinforced in my mind during that day of, okay, we can talk about IPAs, we can talk about hazies, we can talk about the mixed cultures and all of that. But as Ashley Carter from Bierstadt has said, lager's on this 500-year winning streak. But there's something to just be said for, good, easy drinking beer.
Oh,
Like a social beverage.
very much so. There was definitely a moment during CBC where I met Eves Debates, and he was drinking one of our Keller Pills in the tap room, and I was like, this is pretty cool. This is where it's at.
I was
uh,
so that's the scene that I was thinking of.
yep,
Because I was there that afternoon, and I was with Evan and Nico,
yep,
who were just gobsmacked that he was at your bar drinking lager.
yep. I think I must have been about 3 feet from you then, because I was there as well.
Yeah.
That was a busy
Yeah, go
week.
ahead.
Yeah.
Um, so as you look at what consumers want, because it's not just what brewers want, but it's what consumers want. Um, how have you all been, I don't know, approaching recipe development on the beer side of things? Is it looking for new flavors and established styles? Is it sticking to just tradition? Is it somewhere in the middle? I mean, Minnesota likes to drink. You mentioned hams and high life. Obviously those fly off the shelves there. There's all of the recreational sports, that exist in the outdoors there, where people just want something, sort of background noise. So when you're thinking about the beer program, what are the beers that you like? How are you approaching those developments?
I think, Minnesota's got a pretty interesting beer culture compared to a lot of the other states. We've got Summit and Shells as these very large breweries doing, over 100,000 barrels a year, and making a lot of pretty easy drinking pale beer. Summit was built on extra pale ale. And their Keller Pills that they redesigned as it's named after the Twins, our baseball team, in partnership with the baseball team, actually, is a really beautiful, beautiful little Pilsner. And then Shells is massive here in
Oh, sure.
Minneapolis, and they make Grain Belt, they make
Yep.
Nordy. They're the second oldest family owned brewery in the U.S. And I think that's really kind of formed the beer culture here, in that people are looking for light drinking, easy to drink beers. We launched a Kolsch last year that is blowing people away. We're selling a lot of Kolsch, more than anybody expected, and I think it's our number 3 SKU right now. It really speaks to what people want here. They want a beer that they can have 3 or 4 of. They want a beer that they can drink with their family and not get sloshed. They want something that's not going to detract from whatever else they're doing. And I think we really fit that bill for people a lot of the time.
I like that. Yeah, it just sort of seems to be. I mean, that's where I want to be as a drinker as well, of just something that is good, easy drinking, has some nuance to it where, when I can let my brain wander a little bit, it'll tease something out and it makes it a little bit more interesting for a minute or two and then, sort of back to it. But um I wonder if you can, because I guess the question is, with all of that in mind, with these beers that you're making, with the background that you had, did you ever think that you'd be talking about THC seltzers?
No, honestly, it was kind of thrust upon us as a industry. Minnesota had this kind of weird legalization of edible hemp derived things. It kind of swung in, and everybody was like, "Wait, we can do this?"
Yeah, so
And I
can you just sort of give the broad strokes about how that happened, because it seems like it took most people by surprise,
Yeah, yeah.
both like
So
both inside and outside of the beverage industry.
yeah, so there was a bill that got put into the Minnesota legislature that was posited as regulating the Delta 8 hemp derived cannabinoid market, which Delta 8 is like a THC derivative that's about 80%, 75% as potent as Delta 9 THC, which is the THC we all are familiar with. And there's a lot of like kind of shady hemp derived Delta 8 stuff on the market, all these interesting and odd cannabinoids that aren't naturally occurring. And so this bill was presented to regulate that market, but they also just wrote in the bill that it would regulate Delta 9 as well. And it got passed. And so, according to the federal farm bill, we can sell things that have Delta 9 THC in them as long as it's derived from hemp. And this bill that went through the Minnesota legislature kind of cemented that we could sell edibles, including beverages that have Delta 9 in them. And it was, I mean, I don't know, locally around the brewery here, and then talking to people I know, everybody was just kind of like, wait, did we just legalize weed in Minnesota? What happened?
Yeah, because it's
um,
it's not just consume, but it was also produce.
yeah, the
Yeah.
production is real key. And the interestingly, Minnesota has some very strict and weird alcohol laws. We just got Sunday sales about 5 years ago.
Oh, you had
Um,
blue laws before that. Yeah.
yeah, we had blue laws. We breweries of if you were a production brewery that distributed beer to liquor stores, you couldn't have a tap room until about 10 years ago.
I remember
Uh,
that. Yeah.
yeah, we've got some weird laws, and they really didn't regulate the hemp market much. I mean, that first summer, right after legalization, there were at our state fair, there were people sitting in moving trucks at all the entrances selling cans of weed seltzer to people just out of the back of a truck. Like it was wild. So, people jumped on it pretty fast, and we're a small local brewery. We're pretty connected to our customer base because we are a cooperative. We have, I think we're a bit over 2,000 members right now that are like members of our co-op and are really tied to the company. And it was pretty obvious that people wanted a seltzer. They wanted a weed beverage. And so we jumped on it, and
Wait, I just want to back up a little bit. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when you say it's pretty clear that people wanted it, so you're in touch with your members. I remember some of the early days of the brewery and having conversations with the guys where it was, putting recipes to a vote or what should we put on next, that kind of thing. Does that still exist?
I think it exists in a bit of more of a a less structured way. I mean, we get a
Okay.
lot of feedback from our customers over the bar. We have a Facebook group, people post in there things that they're like, hey, I'd really love to see this beer again that we haven't made in, 9 years. Um, we I'd say we have a pretty good feedback loop with our members. We send out questionnaires, we send out newsletters to them, and the number of members that have gotten a hold of my email address and send me messages about things that they want to see or want to hear about is a lot.
Um, so I guess when you're saying that you were getting the feedback from folks that they wanted a seltzer, like how is that coming in? Like through all of
Messages,
those groups, through all those emails, through all of those.
yeah, yeah, over the bar and Facebook messages and the general chatter of social media mostly.
Okay. I'm just trying to paint the timeline here and get sort of an
Oh, for sure.
understanding. But all right, so
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
So when we first decided to launch our hemp beverages, which we call the stuff that we make for ourselves, chill state, um, we, I think a lot of the folks were like, we want LaCroix, but with weed in it. And we looked at it as, well, we make beer. We make beer that tastes like beer. We don't make a lot of like heavily fruited beer or heavily adjuncted stuff. Like we really focus on like IPAs that taste like IPAs and lagers that taste like lagers, and making beer that exemplifies what we love in beer. And so when we were like, well, we're going to make a weed seltzer, let's make it taste like weed. Which is very different than most of the crowd. Most of them are some sort of fruit flavoring or some sort of fruit puree and a little bit of THC, and you're off to the races. We instead decided to lean into terpenes and kind of high-end weed strains, if you will. So grapefruit Kush and pineapple express, like these kind of designer weed strains and the flavor profiles that come from them, and made, I think, a pretty unique beverage for the market.
So how does the how does recipe development begin on that? Like you named all these strains, right? So did you start with 50 and whittle it down to three? Did you start with, just those three and you landed on it? Like how do you run trials on something like this?
I think we started with probably a dozen or so strains. We're working with a terpene company called Abstract Labs, and I've gotten to know the our sales guy and over the last couple of years there. We started using them for beer originally, and now for the hemp seltzers. And I just called them up, and it's like, hey, this is kind of what we're looking for. I want something that's a little bit fruity, something that's still like dank and sticky and still very like weed forward. Sent me a bunch of samples, and we just did bench trials, diluting it out into what we decided was going to be our seltzer base. We made our seltzer base kind of based on our hop water base, which is a fairly acidic, um, pretty aromatic hop water. And we just kind of worked on it from there. A lot of bench trials, a lot of blending. I think one of the things I think about a lot is, in writing or in art, music, people think about their like ideal customer, their ideal person that they're selling to. And when I think about these, I think about my wife. She really enjoys these seltzers. And so I think about what she would want out of it. She wants something that doesn't have any calories, that's zero sugar, that doesn't come across sweet. And I try to think about what she would want to drink and then make a beverage that fits that flavor profile. And it tends to work out for us. I think she's a pretty good consumer for me to keep in my head as we're working on these products.
And it's just a straight up like regular seltzer, right? Non-alcoholic seltzer, just fizzy
Yep.
water as the base.
Yeah, I mean it's more or less like a hop water. It's carbonated water. We have to de-aerate it because too much oxygen will break down the THC emulsion.
Huh.
We acidify it. We found that a certain amount of citric acid and ascorbic acid kind of gives some mouthfeel to it and helps the beverage be more like fulfilling. Um, kind of the difference between drinking like uh, seltzer water that's just like your store brand seltzer water versus like Topo Chico, which actually has a fair bit of mineral profile. Having that acidity in there helps make it more fulfilling, and I think makes it feel more like a social beverage, and that it fills that niche that beer or wine would fill otherwise.
Yeah.
Just bubbly water doesn't do it for me, so adding
Hmm.
that acidity really helps round it.
So when you talk about beer and wine in social settings, right, it's a social lubricant in some ways. You have a beer or two, or a glass of wine, and you feel a little bit different. I'm not talking about intoxication, but um, you do feel different. How do these hit? How do these, in your experience now, affect drinkers or impact drinkers?
I think it really does fit that niche of a social beverage. I really do believe in the idea of um, social lubricant, a little bit of beverage in your hand. It helps people have something to do with their bodies, so they're not like standing there thinking about how if their arms look awkward or not. It helps break down a little bit of the social anxiety. And they really do fit that niche really surprisingly well. They also loosen you up a little bit. They do intoxicate you. Very much depending on people's THC tolerance will determine how intoxicated they will get you. But they fit that niche quite well. What we've seen in our tap room doing on-site consumption is that groups will come in and six people sit down at a table, four of them grab beer, two of them grab seltzers, and they hang out just as they would otherwise, as if they were six people having a beer together.
Yeah.
There's no real like social change or difference that happens because some people are consuming a different intoxicant than other people. Kind of honestly the same we've seen with our hop waters is the same thing where people sit down and it doesn't seem to matter if somebody's drinking a intoxicating beverage or a non-intoxicating beverage. They're still having that social setting and that connection with the people around them that I think you honestly need that lubricant. So yeah.
When I was talking to Scott from Lua on the show a couple weeks ago, talking about their brand Climbing Kites, which you guys make. Um, on the menu, they had um, various levels, like the milligram dosage, and it was if you're a beginner, start here. If you're a little bit more comfortable, start here. If you feel like you're experienced, you can go here. Um, are you all doing the same thing, like education wise? Because like for me,
Yeah.
like I haven't had one of these yet, right? And I'm curious about them enough that I will try one at some point. But I know if I'm out and I'm at the bar and I'm drinking lager, um, I know my limits typically, by ABV. Or and when it's time to call it a night and get in a cab and that kind of thing. Um, and I feel like for me at least, and maybe I'm making too much out of this, it's the I don't know how much is right, not right. Like I don't know the effects of it on the next day, and I'm guessing I'm not alone in that worry. Is so I guess the question is like, how do you all talk to newbies like me about it?
uh, you know, it's interestingly, I think it's not been as big of a hurdle as I mean, I honestly thought it would be a bigger one to begin with, but people are generally pretty familiar with THC as an intoxicant. It's the numbers are pretty high for like millennial Gen Z consumption of THC. Like people know what it feels like. Um, The beverages are a
All
bit
right. So
different.
now I'm in the very low minority. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, it is the beverages are different than like a gummy or hitting a vape pen or something. They hit your body pretty fast. Being that the THC is water soluble, it also is just like ready to be absorbed into your bloodstream. You open a can, and assuming you're not like uh, somebody who smokes multiple times a day and is has massive tolerance, you open a can, you start drinking it, and you will feel the intoxication before you're done with the can. It comes on fast, unlike a gummy, which you eat a gummy and 30 minutes later you go, man, I'm not high at all, and you eat another gummy and then you're too high. So it helps prevent that scenario in that the come up happens pretty fast.
Mhm.
But also, what we found is people are buying these to drink at home for the most part. They do drink them on premise with us, but generally, the first time you consume THC is not a seltzer at a bar. Just the same as like the first time you have 6 shots of tequila is probably not at a bar. It's at your house or at a party with your friends. Um, you know, we really haven't seen the issue of like over intoxication. Occasionally somebody gets a little too high for how they want, as a little higher than they want to be, but it hasn't been like, people get too drunk all the time. It's the issues that we've ran into of people over consuming are far overshadowed by the issues of people over consuming alcohol by far.
Gotcha. Um, and I mean, does it fit in? I guess can it fit in with the other beverages as well, right? I mean, I think about being out on a night like that with when I was there and everybody was drinking lagers, and you get back to the hotel bar and it's like, okay, I've had enough beer for the night. I might have a cocktail at the hotel bar before going to bed, which I think is common for a lot of folks. If you're out to dinner, maybe you're starting off with a cocktail or having wine with dinner, that kind of thing. um do these seltzers fit in with other beverages, like on the course of a night, like a night out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely see people switching back and forth. I would never suggest somebody do this, but I do think that our chill state blends really well with lime juice and gin. I think it's a wonderful combination. I will say, if you're not a experienced consumer, blending the two could get you a little past where you want to be, a little faster than you want to get there. But they fit in pretty well. I will say, like, you know, if I was at a conference or something and I was out at the bar all night with my friends and then went back to a hotel room, popping a seltzer at that point might be a really nice move. There really is no hangover from it. So it's going to hydrate you a little bit. It's going to keep the buzz going and maybe make your hangover the next day a little bit less intense.
Okay, I like that. um I mean, you mentioned adding gin, so it's important to point out that these are, like, I guess it's fair to call them non-alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they have no alcohol in them.
right.
That would run afoul of the TTB. They would not let us put any Delta 9 into a alcohol containing beverage.
Right. So we were talking about quality early on, and there is, I think, concern these days among some of the NA manufacturers about, well, we have to keep pathogens out. We have to make sure that things are pasteurized or tunnel pasteurized. I know seltzer doesn't always fall into that, but talk to me about, you know, how, I guess, these are packaged or consumer safe, where we don't have to worry about something scary growing inside of them.
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into making sure that we're making a safe product for people. I think brewers can be a bit cavalier when it comes to food safety, just because beer in and of itself is a safe product. The pH is low enough. It's got alcohol in it. It's got a CO2 dissolved into it. Like it's a pretty safe environment where you'd have to be working pretty hard to hurt somebody with like a pathogen or chemical intrusion or something like that. These do carry more risk. We've put a lot of effort into having a HACCP plan, a hazard analysis and critical control point plan. We do a lot of testing on our product. We also make sure that like the product in and of itself is as safe of a product design as we could give people. The pH is very low. Not many pathogens could survive in it. There is no sugar in it for pathogens to consume, to propagate. We have a number of products that use some form of chemical preservative to make sure that they are safe to consume. We don't do heat pasteurization in our facility, but I know that there are other people that produce seltzers that do heat pasteurization or retort pasteurization. There's a lot of thought process that goes into it. It's more food science than it is brewing. And putting on that mindset, one means that you have to learn a lot really fast and make sure that you're not producing a product that's going to hurt somebody. But it's just a different mindset when you're thinking about how you produce this beverage for people. Brewing is there's not a lot of concern about hurting somebody unless they drink too much and get themselves in trouble. This stuff, you could hurt somebody if you were willy-nilly. And I've definitely seen some folks doing some things that I would not feel safe doing. Cold brew coffee that's not retort pasteurized with THC in it. Like that's scary. That's not, the pH isn't low enough there. So I do think that consumer trust in the brand matters a lot in that regard. Like people know Fair State as a brand. They know who we are. They've been drinking our beer for the last decade. And so them knowing us and having faith in us and trust in us matters a lot when it comes to these kind of novel beverages. That's one reason why I think that we're having a fair bit of success compared to like people that are just jumping in to launch a THC beverage with no brewery, no name, no experience. Like people don't know who they are. And so it does increase that kind of anxiety about product. Beyond like the safety of the product, we also think a lot about potency and making sure that our advertised milligrams of THC are what's in the package. Just as if you bought a beer that said it was 6% alcohol and it was actually 3% alcohol, you would feel cheated. If you buy a seltzer that says it's 5 milligrams of THC and it's actually 2, you'd probably feel cheated as well. Yeah. So we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort vetting different testing labs, vetting different THC emulsion providers, finding products that felt like they were repeatable, high quality, and then making sure that our testing around them was sufficient. The number of testing labs that I went through in that first 3 months before I found a lab that I felt comfortable with that returned results that were repeatable and reliable was it was expensive. I probably spent $20,000 on testing in that first 3 months that did not give me good numbers. Now I've got a good lab. I trust them, but I still test them, make sure that they're giving me reliable numbers on a regular basis. So there's a lot more quality control that has to go into it to give people a high quality product.
I like that. I mean, and because I guess being at roughly the beginning of this, and it seems like this has long legs to it or a long tail, to it, taking the right steps now probably ensures better consumer confidence down the road, right? I mean, it's like a fuck up can put this whole thing back quite a while, like a public one.
Very much so. I keep an eye on like our, Minneapolis Reddit groups and stuff, and people talk about this seltzer, this brewery, that brewery. And it takes one bad experience to have one vocal person out in the market talking about how all these seltzers don't do anything. They don't work. It's all junk. And that's because they got one early in the seltzer game that the person wasn't doing their due diligence, the producer wasn't, and it was labeled as 5 milligrams and it had 1 milligram in it, so they didn't feel anything. And so now they're kind of evangelically anti hemp seltzers, and there's a fair bit of that out there. And at the same time, there's also people that, they've become customers. They trust the product. They trust us, and they become evangelically for the product. I think, Minnesota also, a year after legalizing seltzers and edibles, gummies and things, we also just legalized adult recreational cannabis use. We don't have the framework in place yet to open dispensaries and have, smokable flower products for sale.
Yeah.
So right now people can only legally get either flower they grow themselves or edibles on the market. I think the market's going to change when they can easily walk into a store and buy flower. But I also think it's just a different consumer. I can go to a concert venue here in town. I was actually, 2 months ago, I went and saw a concert at a pretty large venue, and they had THC seltzers there for sale. And, it was psychedelic rock. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great move right now. But I'm not going to be able to walk in there and like buy flower and smoke it in the middle of a concert because you can't smoke indoors. It's a different product. It's a different market. And if you want a small dose in a social setting, the seltzers are a great way to go. If you want a high dose at home to get ripped and watch Hot Tub Time Machine, flower is going to be there for you. So it's just different usage cases.
I like that. Where do you see this category going?
I really see in the short term, I think there's going to be some like gold rush kind of action. People are going to make some money and they're going to think that they can grow indefinitely. It's going to look a lot like craft beer over the last decade, or
It's going to look like those mixed
beer.
firm programs from 7 years ago.
Yeah. There's definitely going to be some gold rush action. But I really think that in like the 5 and 10 year timeline, you're just going to see a lot of breweries making these products. It's going to expand, state to state. Some states don't allow it. Some states do. It's going to become a more common thing on the market. And you're going to walk into, a random brew pub in a random town, and they'll have 8 beers on tap, and they might have 2 THC seltzers on tap. And I think really it's going to turn into just another product line, another thing that people make. Just like, seltzers went through a very similar thing. There was a boom, there's a crash going on right now, but you're still seeing almost every tap room you go into has some sort of gluten-free, fruity, seltzery option that they make in-house. And, they're not going to try to put it in cans and think they're going to get rich, but they're going to have a product for that customer that wants that.
I like it. Yeah, it's I'm really curious about this category, and I think, like now talking with you and talking with other folks who've been in the space, like it does seem like it has, I don't know, a pretty interesting future ahead of it. And as laws change, just becoming more commonplace. So I'm here for it if it makes people happy. I've been asking folks on the show for, I don't even know how long now, but the green door question. And the premise is, on the television show The Good Place, the final season, they introduced this concept of a green door, and the characters can walk through it. And when they do, they're anywhere, doing whatever they want to be doing. And so if we had a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
Ooh. Well, however, a brewery, I'd probably end up somewhere on a beach in Mexico with a couple of my friends eating ceviche and drinking whatever industrial lager is available. Um, you know, just give me a nice place with my friends that I love and care about, and cold beer and some delicious food, and I'm going to be pretty happy.
I like that. That is
Yeah.
spoken like a guy who's living through a Minnesota winter right now. You're just give me lager and warmth and sand.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had a very mild winter this year, but um, being warm sounds nice.
Joe, I like it. Thanks for being on the show this week. Thanks for peeling the curtain back a little bit and giving us all some insight on this. It really is a fascinating category, and I'm glad a brewery like Fair State is pushing this forward. So thanks for reaching out, and thanks for taking the time.
Of course, man. No problem. You have a good day.
Cheers. Have you had a THC seltzer yet? Where does it fit in with your beer drinking, if at all? Tell me about it. The email is John Hall, that's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. That's also how you can get in touch with questions, comments, or guest suggestions. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. You can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. And don't forget, you can also follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. If you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, you can email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Speaking of that, attention brewers, registration for the 2024 Best of Craft Beer Awards is now open. Sign up today. Now in its 10th year, this is a BJCP sanctioned event, judged by fellow brewers, professional judges, and industry leaders. Judged in Oregon, it's the third largest professional brewing competition in North America, and it's a chance to have your hard work evaluated and rewarded. Use promo code ALLABOUTBEER to receive 10% off of your order. Don't delay. Register your beers today by visiting bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. One more time, that's bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. Okay, last reminder, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday. The BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And you can go to probrewer.com where you can read our original articles from the All About Beer team once a week by going to probrewer.com. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.